So this video is intended for students who are already progressing with their log, revising it to make a paper on their observations and describing the things that they noticed while they were observing. One key thing that most students notice is the barriers that prevent us from noticing things, and that's no small surprise. Sometimes that even forms the basis of a thesis for the paper. Here we have that cartoon Jeremy listening, and of course he doesn't even notice the person in the room. There can be many barriers to observation, and some can be more subtle than others. I'm hoping that people notice very early on, because it's part of the entire class of writing and choosing language, that oftentimes it'll be our language itself that forms a potential barrier for observation. But let's review our assignment so far. So far, we asked you to generate several pages of log, including having columns, which many students will skip over, though I think it's to your advantage to actually take that seriously. The columns are there for a reason, so go back to the assignment and see why they're there. It's actually meant to help you. It's not just meant to be busy work. Please don't try and go and fill out a log afterwards, because that defeats the purpose. You want to hold in suspension your skepticism until you see what you find. If you haven't done that, you found yourself staring at a blank piece of paper, or maybe not even doing the observation assignment at all because you didn't believe in what you were doing. Again, that's where I have to encourage you, invite you, cajole you to contact me, because I can get you started on the right path and help you get over the skepticism. That's a form of writer's block, not meeting the needs of the assignment, of a tried and true assignment that can really generate good papers. I want you to also be thinking about examining that right-hand column closely for evidence of a main point. One of the reasons why we ask you to generate the log at all, one of the reasons why we ask you to use the columns at all, is because that right-hand column can provide fodder, provide information, can provide reflection enough for generating a main point that can be successfully used to choose which details to include on the paper. In other words, that right-hand column helps choose which of the many details you have in the left-hand column to include in your paper. You want to be organizing the details to include or help illustrate that main point. You want to be omitting irrelevant details, and that's tough to do because many people think that everything's essential to their paper. I'll also, of course, get questions, if I haven't answered them from the outset, about how many paragraphs should it be? What should it look like? How do I conclude? What about a title? All of those I'll give information and answers to. Those are important questions, but you'll notice that our class starts well before the final draft of the paper and how many paragraphs it should be and even the font style for a reason. It's because other things have to be taken care of first, otherwise we haven't really got a good paper, a good raw material for a paper at all. For any of those questions, we're going to be thinking about what we've done during the course of the assignment. If you've asked yourself at some point, how do I describe this thing that I'm looking at, this thing that I'm carefully observing, then you've done actually the work of the assignment. Don't hesitate or shy away from those difficult moments where you wonder what something's called or how to actually articulate what it's like to be there. That should actually be a fruitful ground for the assignment. I've got many examples to show you how that works. But here we get a good little cartoon from Dilbert where Catbert's saying, "This report says you slapped our CEO senseless after he said the key to success is following your instinct. I was following my instinct. I was also being passionate, engaged, and creative. Apparently the things you say actually mean stuff. How was I supposed to know?" And of course, I don't like reading out cartoons to you, but the idea is still relevant. The words you choose do mean something. They're not irrelevant. That's why I've asked you to go beyond describing things in a vague way by saying such things as, "I went there and saw some stuff and things happened." The vague statements don't really help you describe what's there, and they won't really work for any descriptive assignment, and they won't work for many assignments when you're asked to observe and describe because they're imprecise. So if anything, description should call upon us to make us more precise. And that can also be a main point too, on what you had to do to be more precise. I want us to take a look at language and language choices, whether language choices were a barrier for this last assignment before the paper comes due. You might remember a sentence like this: "The entry is dirty, there are dust bunnies." The description should be apt. I need to see attention to language here. Dust bunnies I get, but are dust bunnies dirt? Dust bunnies are something that need to be dusted, but dirt is dirt, and dust bunnies are dust bunnies, and they're different. And I know that people might be sloppy in their language while they're speaking, but not while we're writing papers. We're trying to be as precise as possible about what we're seeing. It's here where attention to detail can really be rewarding for us. You'll notice that most jobs require an attention to detail. We need very little vagueness in our word choice. And again, that doesn't have to be flowery language. From today's video, I want you to take away the idea that observation should naturally make us think of words we have available to describe what we observe. So if you found yourself or find yourself as you're rewriting, revising, getting that paper just so, searching for the right word, not just because you want a better word, a word that sounds important, but because you want the apt word, the precise word that describes what it is that you're seeing, then you're doing the stuff of the assignment. I want you to keep struggling with that. That should be a good struggle, actually. And don't give up. You have to persist with it. Usually students, when they come to my class or any of my classes, understand the importance of building vocabulary throughout their lives. I get students who, from the very first day, say the one key thing they want to do is build their vocabulary. Don't you feel that it's somewhat important to have a good collection of words, or what the ancient poet Beowulf, for the poem Beowulf, called a word hoard? Don't you feel that having a good word hoard, a hoard of language, don't you feel that having words at your command does help you in your professions and in your life? And more so than just as decoration. I think most students could agree that they may just have a felt sense that vocabulary, language, it does matter. It can impress upon others your knowledge, and it's more than just decoration. And in fact, it is more than just decoration, as we've tried to talk about in another video. It actually enriches the stuff of knowing, and it allows us to see and describe things better. However, let's go to some basic facts, and don't you agree with some of this? Haven't you seen this happen too among your colleagues? Students don't want to bother increasing their vocabulary. It's unfortunate but true. They may want a bigger vocabulary, but what are they willing to do to get it? Sometimes students have been indoctrinated into context clues, and so while context clues can be illuminating in reading, they're not the be-all and end-all, because there are some words that you can't get from a reading by just judging from context clues. That's the reason why dictionaries were there at all. Dictionaries online, dictionaries, print dictionaries. Context clues can be helpful, don't get me wrong, but we ought to also take the effort and look it up. Also, not many people anymore like looking up language, even if they know the importance of it. It's the work involved, and that's why they call it work. That's why they make it a college class. You have to be interested in vocabulary, and when you think about it from a teacher's perspective, the teacher doesn't know all the vocabulary that you don't know, or might partially know. Only you really know that. So if you see a word that you don't know while you're reading, you need to take the time to bother to look it up, or to ask what it means, or to pursue a definition so you understand in more detail. If people just constantly skip over words that they don't know, they're skipping over meaning that might be essential to a reading that they have or an assignment that they get. If they skip over the word in the sentence, they may not understand the sentence. If they skip over the sentence, they might not understand the paragraph. If they skip over parts of the paragraph, they may not understand the larger parts of the article. And it continues to the logical conclusion of not getting most of the meaning that you can. I argue from this perspective, it just increases the sheer joy of what it is that you're doing, and you don't feel mystified by what it is that you read. You don't slap the cover of a book or turn off the book nowadays and say, well, what did I just read? Because you've forgotten it all already. You pick up more meaning as you delve into the language more. It's okay to be countercultural. Our culture doesn't reward people immediately, and certainly in the long run, if they don't put in the work. And it does require a little bit of work. Malcolm X really teaches us. I've talked about this in another video as well, and in class. He teaches us that some things are really worth looking up and worth putting to memory. If I haven't convinced you of that, please seek me out. Please bring it as a topic for class, because Malcolm X's lesson still applies to us in a digital age, when such activities that he had to engage in are really remote from our experience, and ones that are difficult for my students to connect to. Okay, I'm just going to review a few things, because we're at the stage where you're thinking about a thesis. The thesis, of course, calls upon our language. And if our language is imprecise with our thesis, it can affect how well we communicate it through our paper. The thesis has to include a subject, yes, where you're sitting. Right? You can't just say that your thesis is about a mall, or about sitting at that restaurant, or about sitting at that park, or about this, because that's not enough. That's a topic, not a thesis. You have to actually comment on that topic and have a unified idea. It should be kind of profound or interesting, and we've looked at examples in previous readings. I've talked about them in another video. I review them here because it bears repetition. It's one of the key areas my students have difficulty with. They either have difficulty creating a thesis, or they may have several theses that they're working toward, right? Or they may have a thesis unsupported by the descriptions that they offer. That's maybe the key set of things that students have difficulty with. It's usually about a person or two, about the place, about the people in that place, or about you in that place. Again, this is mostly review, but I do think this is important enough to bear some repetition. That's usually what I get in terms of papers, and these are the most successful papers. You don't try to do all of these. Try to do one of them. Why do I say a person or two? Just to review that for a minute. Because I don't want you to talk about the whole wealth of humanity. I don't want you to talk about the population of St. Paul. No, no, no. You got to get in there. Show me individuals. The only story of St. Paul is a story of individual people who live there. In description, you can't describe the whole populace. You have to get in there and describe individual personages. Okay. I talked about other common problems, about how it's difficult sometimes to recognize which details need to be included, which need to be eliminated. I don't think I need to repeat that. Other common problems, more basically, students sometimes will have problems putting readers there. They won't be able to put us at the scene, or they'll be tempted to try and take a picture and have it as a substitute. But again, I'm asking you to create a verbal image, not a digital image. You have to work with the language. That's why we're in a language class. Oftentimes, students don't show how their senses led to the main point or conclusion. And that should be part of the paper. You might want to think that through, because you got to show us. Remember Samuel Scudder walking us through his thinking as he concludes that from Professor Agassiz he got the best entomological lesson he could have ever gotten. Or you might remember Agassiz within the reading. Facts are stupid things until. By now you should be able to finish that sentence. Do you remember what it means? Think about your reading. Do you remember it? If you were paying attention, you probably got it. I can even show it to you here. Just review it here for a minute. Right? Never be content that you've seen all there is. Facts are stupid things, he would say, until brought into connection with some general law. And really, that's your job. You're bringing together those described facts and making some sense out of them, just as every writer does. If you're needing help at this point, review some of the work that we've done so far to understand why you're doing what you're doing, the importance of it, the essential nature of it for this assignment, future assignments, and really your disciplined study.